So what's up people, and welcome to another Alita Battle Angel GUNNM video. So for this video I wanted to go into the topic of what if. Now this is a topic that was suggested by MaxTac so thank you very much MaxTac. He was wondering if I would be willing to go into the lore and talk about certain parts of the story where if the story did not go the way we see it, what is my opinion and what I feel might happen. Now I did one of these types of what if videos in the past where it revolved around the theme of what if Alita was resurrected with all her memory intact? What would have happened at that point? And so I will leave a link to that video in the description section of this video. But I did want to make a second version, and that is this video itself. And so for this video, I wanted to make the topic, what would happen if Hugo didn't die at the end of the Hugo arc? And so I do want to delve into this. One thing I will say is this is just my opinion. And so please take everything with a grain of salt. And I am making this video mostly to stimulate discussions amongst you. And so please feel free to bring your opinion with regards to what you think will happen if Hugo did survive at the end of the movie or the end of the Hugo arc in the comic series. Now before I begin, I do want to give my spoiler alert. If you have not watched the movie or have read at least to the end of the Hugo arc in Battle Angel Alita, you may want to turn off this video if you don't want to be spoiled. Also, I will be going into a little bit beyond in the comic to talk about some of the things that go on, knowing what happens after the Hugo arc. So if you don't want to hear about that, then I would suggest that you turn off this video as well. However, if you've read the entire comic, the original series, not Last Order or Mars Chronicle, then you should be okay. I won't be going into anything in Last Order or Mars Chronicle. So with that said, this is my spoiler alert, and as always, please watch at your discretion. Okay, so yeah, Hugo kicks the bucket at the end of the Hugo arc and the end of the movie. And regardless of whether you look at the movie or the comic, the way Hugo dies is very similar, although the story leading up to it is quite different. Now for both mediums, Hugo dies due to the defense ring coming down from Zalem and slicing him up, and although Alita is able to catch him before he falls, his arm is so beat up that it finally snaps and he falls to his death. And of course, with Hugo gone, Alita goes into her dark side, and that opens up the Motorball arc in the comic. And what we expect to see is a similar sort of situation in the next movie, if there is a next movie, because the end of the first movie closes with Alita going out into the final championship of the Motorball tournament. But what if Hugo survived? In fact, what if his arm did not snap and Alita was able to pull him up to his safety? What would happen at that time? And of course, there are two answers depending upon whether you take the comic or the movie. And in fact, due to the different stories that come up to that point and lead towards his impending death, I feel that in fact the movie situation is a bit more complex than the comic. And because of that, I would like to start out by talking about how I feel the comic may proceed if Alita was able to save Hugo, and then later I will talk about the movie. Okay, so if we look at the relationship between Hugo and Alita in the comic, it is a much colder relationship than that of the movie. And that is basically a one-sided situation. Alita is as warm and empathic to Hugo in the comic as she is in the movie, but Hugo is a lot colder in his response to Alita. And he was never truly in love with Alita, and in fact, he was extremely manipulative, trying to have Alita do things for his advantage. At the very end, things might have changed a little, but there was never ever a really strong romantic bond between the two characters. Even at the end, he did not ever tell Alita that he loved her. And so if Hugo is saved, they may not have as strong a bond as what you saw in the movie. But one thing is certain is that his desire to go up to Zalem was far, far stronger in the comic than it was in the movie. Although if you read the novels of cinematic universe, the desire may be quite similar. But if you just looked at the movie, you didn't see the reasons why Hugo was so obsessed with Zalem. And in fact, if you saw how Hugo reacted at the very end when he was climbing up the cable, the Hugo in the movie was doing it mostly because he understood that there was no other choice, because he was basically a wanted criminal and there was no place else to go. Whereas Hugo in the comic was seriously still obsessed with wanting to go to Zalem. That was the desire, not because he couldn't be anywhere else, but because he wanted to go to Zalem. And so there is this different obsession. There is really not a strong bond between Hugo and Alita in the comic, and Hugo is a lot more obsessive of going to Zalem. Now the other difference is, of course, in the comic, Hugo is not targeted by any faction, as we see in the movie. The reason the defense ring came down was because Zalem periodically sent a defense ring down to ensure that nothing was climbing up the cable, such as Hugo. And so it was just out of bad luck and bad timing that Hugo just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's why he got destroyed by the defense ring. So unlike the character in the movie, Hugo in the comic is really no longer targeted once Alita saves him. It is true that he was a criminal, and it is true that the factory put a bounty on his head. But the moment Alita pretended to have taken Hugo down and showed Hugo's head to the robots that came from the factory, they designated that Alita has eliminated Hugo and cleared the bounty. And considering the fact that Zalem was really never obsessed in going after Hugo, and they only put bounties out because of the fact that they find certain characters of Iron City to be nagging, that they want them eliminated, then the moment they're eliminated, they are basically forgotten. You see, Zalem considers the citizens of Iron City to be somewhat like rats or cockroaches or insects, of that level. And the same way you don't obsess over whether a certain rat was really killed, the moment you identify that you killed that rat, you're not going to dwell upon, was that the rat that I was thinking about? You kill it and you forget about it, right? And so Zalem, the moment they identified that Hugo was dead, did not need to worry about Hugo anymore. So if Alita saved Hugo at that point, he would not have been hounded by the people of Zalem. So he would be able to go free and stay within Iron City in peace. However, it isn't the environment that I feel would eventually deteriorate the relationship between Alita and Hugo in the comic. It is Hugo himself, because of his imbalance between the obsession he has for Zalem and his lack of compassion he has for Alita, that eventually Hugo will separate from Alita because Alita cannot really work with him while he is so focused on going to Zalem. There may be another attempt at him trying to get up there due to his obsessive behavior. Now, a couple of other things that would occur is that because Alita doesn't go into the dark side because she has saved Hugo, she would not go to the motorball to try to get out of her dark side, right? Instead, she would obsess over taking care of Hugo after she had saved him, and that will probably take a good majority of her life at that time. She will probably go back, continue to be a hunter-warrior, and it might end up being very similar to a lifestyle that you see after the motorball arc in the comic, where she is singing in the Kansas bar. She may settle down in that area. Even if the relationship with Hugo eventually deteriorates, she may become more mature by that time, that her obsession with Hugo will change to understanding that there is a difficulty in continuing that relationship. I don't think that she will have any anger towards Hugo, but there may be a much more distancing as things go on. If Hugo does climb the tower, she may eventually fail to save his life, but by that time, she may accept the fact that Hugo was self-destructive, and if Hugo died later due to his obsession, she may be able to handle it a lot better than she did in the comic. And because she doesn't go to motorball, she would not be scouted by the Toon organization, in which case whether she will go out to the Badlands is hard to tell. And in fact, there may never be a crime that Alita has committed that puts her in that yellow door situation, because there would potentially not be a Japan arc as well. And that is because of two potential differences due to what happens if she saves Hugo. Since she doesn't go to the motorball, she would never be televised on the big screen. And if that doesn't happen, then there would not be that traumatic incident that Japan sees. And so even if that traumatic incident occurred because of the situation that led to Hugo climbing up the cable, where Japan lost his face, we do know that he eventually gets saved by Sarah. And had it not been for that traumatic incident, Japan was moving towards redemption. And if Sarah continued to remain alive because Japan did not see Alita on the big screen that turned into a major catastrophe that took Sarah's life, Sarah and Japan may continue to be together. And they may have a difficult situation, but considering how tenacious Sarah was in loving Japan, those two might actually have a successful relationship. Now, it's hard to say whether they will cross paths in the future. I'm talking about Alita and Japan. But even if they do, it may be a different situation to what we see in the comic. Hugo is still alive, so Alita's outright rage towards Japan may not exist. And similarly, since Sarah has eased Japan's soul, he may not go into the traumatic experience that he had when he saw Alita on the big screen. So if they do cross paths later, they may be able to go by without having a tragic incident arise. Now the other thing is that if Alita doesn't go to motorball, she never relinquishes her berserker body. In which case, there may be no opportunity for Destinova to get that berserker body. However, there still may be a possibility that Destinova identifies that there is a berserker body in existence in Iron City, in which case he may eventually target Alita to try to get that berserker body as he did in the comic. And so it may still result in Destinova crossing paths eventually with Alita, and if those two cross paths, you know that Destinova is going to become really interested in Alita, and this may lead to a very, very different but still dark road where Destinova's plans end up in Alita's anguish. How it will go is very hard to tell, but whenever Destinova comes into the equation, it's never really a good outcome. So I do feel that it may end up being a lot more stable than the way we saw in the comic, because the comic went into sheer, utter devastation, right? It was the sheer annihilation of Iron City during the Japan arc. That may not happen, and because of that, even if the relationship between Alita and Hugo eventually deteriorates, Alita will still have other people around her. She will have Ganzu. She will have Ito. She will have Koyomi. She won't have Shumira because she's never met Joshigan. And because of that, her Panzerkunst might not go back up to the levels that you see in the comic. But it may not be necessary because Alita won't be going into her self-reflection and her adventures to find her past. And if it doesn't, then the adventures with Den may not happen, the adventures that go on in Last Order and Mars Chronicle may not happen. Now, with that said, there may be a possibility that she will eventually meet Den, because we do know that Den is making a plan to try to take out Zalem, which will also result in the destruction of Iron City. Alita is in Iron City. Alita will want to defend Iron City. So if she finds out that Den and the Barjacks eventually are coming to attack Zalem and will result in the destruction of Iron City, she still may go out and challenge Den to try to save Iron City. And at that time, will she meet Radio Chaos? I don't know. But there still may be situations that will eventually flow together where the two characters meet. But in any case, if Alita meets Hugo, although there may be other adventures that Alita will encounter in the future, there will definitely be a difference, a significant difference in her life compared to that of the comic. One character that she probably will not meet at all is Figure 4. And if she doesn't meet Figure 4, then of course that relationship will never bloom. And yet Alita is an empathic character. So if she doesn't meet Figure 4, there still may be a possibility that she will meet somebody else and establish a relationship there. And so it may be a bit more peaceful outcome if Hugo is saved. And it really does show just how pivotal his death was towards bringing Alita into the path that we see in the comic that takes her into a seriously dark but very character building and revealing adventure. Okay, so now let's talk about the cinematic Alita. So as we know, in the cinematic version of Alita and Hugo, their relationship is a lot more real. It's a lot closer, and Hugo is a lot more kind of openly empathic character. If you want to say he's a much more mature character, if you want to say he's a much more outgoing character, caring of other people, whichever way, the difference between that character and the character in the comic actually makes a positive relationship between the cinematic Alita and the cinematic Hugo. And so if Hugo survives the incident, then the relationship between Alita and Hugo will strengthen to possibly the point that Hugo will stop obsessing over trying to get to Zalem and rather focus his attention to Alita and try to establish a stronger bond. And it probably will establish as a stronger bond, not just because of their relationship and their feelings towards each other, but at that point, those two are somewhat by themselves in that world. You see, unlike the Hugo in the comic, the Hugo in the movie is still a target to Destinova. And since Destinova has so much power up in Zalem as the Watcher, he is going to continue to go after Hugo and Alita. And so there's really no way for Hugo to remain in Iron City because Destinova will send the factory officials to continuously hound Hugo and Alita. And in fact, if Alita remains in Iron City, then that'll give a reason for Destinova to wreak havoc to the characters around Alita just to hurt Alita psychologically. He will go after Ito, he will go after Koyomi, he will go after Nurse Gerhardt. And so, because Hugo is a wanted criminal, and because Alita knows that she may end up hurting other people if she remains in Iron City, I have a feeling they will go out into the Badlands. Now, if that happens, we don't really know what the Badlands are like in the cinematic universe. So I will have to go back to the comic verse and assume that the Badlands are similar to the comic verse with the exception of one difference, which is the Mars ship is out in the Badlands. So the first destination Alita may go to is the Mars ship to continue to stock up on ammunition and weapons to be able to confront Destinova when he comes after Alita and Hugo. And you know Destinova is going to go after Alita and Hugo even if those two go out into the Badlands. Now from that point on, there is a possibility of many encounters. So I will go over each one. One could be Figure 4, one could be Radio Chaos, and of course the big one is Lord Den. Now with Figure 4 it'll be interesting. Figure 4, as we know, is kind of a hired mercenary working for Zalem, one job at a time. And so if they do encounter each other, they may encounter each other in a similar sort of situation. If there's any reason for Alita to cross paths with one of the trains going into the Badlands, she may see Figure 4 there. But because her relationship is with Hugo, there may not be any reason for her to establish a relationship with Figure 4, in which case Figure 4 just turns out to be another character that happens to be on the train for Alita to meet. I don't know. It depends on what Alita will be doing and why she will be going towards that train. And that brings us to the second character, which is Lord Den. Now, since Zalem is putting so much pressure on both Hugo and Alita, there is a good possibility that Hugo and Alita will become even more counterculture than they are right now. And Lord Den is constantly looking for people who are rebellious, especially against Zalem. And so their objectives will be very similar. Alita will want to continue to try to take down Zalem for two reasons. One is because Destinova is out there. The second reason is because that's her original Mars mission. For Hugo, his obsession with Zalem may end up being his anger with Zalem, right? It's a sour grape sort of situation. When you can't reach your destination and when that destination is constantly pummeling you down, you end up being much more angry towards that situation, although it was originally an obsession. So he may end up having a very dark relationship between himself and Zalem, considering the fact that it was Zalem that turned him into a cyborg, which he may still not like because he has that negative feeling towards hard bodies with the exception of Alita. And that would be perfect for Den to recruit Alita and Hugo into the Barjacks. And that will be then interesting because of the fact that Lord Den is still continuing to take that cannon and eventually attack Zalem. But this time, he will have Alita on his side rather than as an adversary. And coming back to that train, the reason Alita may be approaching that train that Figure 4 is on is because she is one of the Barjacks that attacks that train. And if that happens, then you might want to pray for Figure 4 because Alita's objective will be to take out any of the mercenaries that are fighting on the train. And if Figure 4 turns out to be that, then considering the fact that Alita can go into rage mode, yeah, she may literally destroy Figure 4 as a member of the Barjack. And so there is this very interesting situation. The confrontation between Den and Zalem may change because of two things. One is because Alita will be on Lord Den's side, supporting him. And the other is because Alita never became a tuned agent. They wouldn't have the ARs that would confront the Barjacks and literally destroy them. So what will happen is a little bit hard to say. But it will be very interesting to see what happens if Alita and Hugo are on the side of the Barjacks. And for all we know, because Koyomi was close to Hugo, she may also accompany them out into the Badlands. And considering the fact that Koyomi was, even in the comic, a support character for Lord Den, she may still be a support character for Lord Den. The only thing that may turn those characters around is when they find out that Lord Den's objective to take out Zalem will also kill the people of Iron City. And of course, Alita will still have her ties to the characters in Iron City, whether it's Dysonito or Nurse Gerhardt or any of the other characters that she becomes closer to while she is still in Iron City. And because of that, eventually she may confront and go against Lord Den. And that still may result in Lord Den failing to be able to take down Zalem. But it will be in a different manner from what we see in the comic. Now, the other possibility is that Alita and Hugo meets Radio Chaos. And if that happens, that may actually be the most positive encounter of the three. Because of the fact that, unlike Lord Den, Radio Chaos wants to go against the tyrannies of Zalem, but in a peaceful manner, using his music and his midnight speeches to be able to calm the people of Zalem. If Alita and Hugo meet with Radio Chaos, then they may be influenced by him to become a much more peaceful group. And they may actually enjoy traveling with Radio Chaos to try to bring a change to Iron City and Zalem, using peace as the effort rather than violence. But if Radio Chaos is there, then we also know that Lord Den is somewhere around in the shadows as well. And if that happens, considering the fact that Radio Chaos is so opposite to Lord Den, then Alita might go out as a warrior for Radio Chaos to confront Lord Den and try to stop him when he tries to attack Iron City. And since Alita and Hugo are still being hounded by Destinova, and considering there is a strong relationship between Destinova and Radio Chaos, when Destinova comes to go after Hugo and Alita and encounters Radio Chaos, it will be interesting to see what happens to Radio Chaos. Will he still be the nice, peaceful, almost naive character that we see in the comic, or will he turn into the other character that we of course know and love? So that will be a very interesting story, and you could actually create an entire story moving forward similar to what you saw in the comic, where there is a confrontation between Destinova and Radio Chaos, and Alita will use that to be able to take out Destinova. And by itself, that will be a very interesting story to see. She may end up chasing Destinova all the way to NORAD, just like we see in the comic, and have that confrontation using Radio Chaos as support to be able to take the Watcher down. And that might be a very interesting story. I would say that might be the most interesting story out of this entire What If series, is that she will go out with Hugo, they will meet with Radio Chaos, they will use that situation to confront Lord Den, and then eventually to confront the Watcher. And by doing so, they may still be able to save Zalem and Iron City, and be able to take out the one great antagonist that occurs in the original series. But in any case, those are the two possibilities that I can think of. And I know that this is just my opinion, and you probably have completely different scenarios from what I have. And so I would like to hear what your scenarios would be in the comment section. What would you think would happen to the story in the comic verse? And what would you think would happen to the story in the cinematic universe had Hugo survived that encounter at the very end and was able to continue to live on with Alita? Yeah, so I'll be looking forward to your comments, and thank you very much for watching this video. I'll continue on with more Battle Angel Alita Battle Angel videos in the future. I hope you join me at that time. And until then, happy movie watching, happy manga reading, and as always, Jaya, nice day everyone.